I think this might be our 40th year actually. Um, and we have a few mandates, and we're mandated to work with the governor and the General Assembly related to the needs of individuals in the state that have hearing loss. We also work with legislators and review legislative programs, make sure everything's like it should be. We help agencies and organizations to either improve the services that they have or establish services for individuals that have hearing loss. And we also have an access center which works with state agencies in scheduling interpreters. So those are the main things that we focus on, but we do a whole lot of other stuff in the background. Um, Let me get my captions clicked on here. All right. Um, I do want to let everybody know that I appreciate questions. It's hard to make a blanket presentation to meet everybody's needs, so I kind of depend on you guys to drive me where you need to go. So don't be afraid to raise your hand and ask a question. You don't have to hold everything to the end unless Amy says so. But I want to start off real quick just talking about some numbers. I feel like I can't really help you to serve the deaf and hard of hearing population effectively if you don't really understand them. So I want to focus a little bit on that to start with. And I want to look at some numbers here. I've already told you about KCDHH. Right now, in the United States, we have about 50 million individuals that have a hearing loss, and that's from mild to profound. It is actually the third largest health issue behind arthritis and heart disease, and it's the fastest growing. So these numbers are just going to keep getting bigger and bigger as we go along. Right now, 1 in 5 teens currently have a hearing loss. That's scary. Um, the reason for this is noise. Every generation figures out how to get a little bit louder and how to get the music a little bit closer to our earbuds, our eardrums. You know, back in my day, we had the great big 8-track player that we had to carry around. Nowadays, you've got the little earbuds that are right there pressed up against your eardrum. If you're sitting beside somebody and you can hear the music through their headphones, they're causing permanent damage to their hearing. Um, if you have children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, uh, encourage them to turn that down. There's actually an organization that has a program that's called to the Left, trying to get people to turn that down, turn that volume down, because once you cause that hearing loss, it's gone and you can't get it back. Um, right now, and I suspect probably all along, but because records weren't kept, we can't prove that. But hearing loss is the number one war wound from our veterans that are coming back from overseas. And that's just because of their exposure to all of the artillery, all the explosions, all the guns. We see so many other individuals that lose their hearing because of the job that they do. And the World Health Organization says that hearing loss is the number one most preventable um, job related disability. And factories, um, we see a lot of our first responders, farmers, people that are exposed to loud machinery all day long are destroying their hearing over a period of time. It can happen from one incident if it's loud enough, but more often than not, it's something that it's exposure over a long period of time. You can Google all of that and find it. It's everywhere online. The last thing that's mentioned on here, and I want to explain just a little bit more, is that individuals that have even a hearing loss are twice as likely to develop dementia. That goes up with the severity of the hearing loss. And I need to emphasize that that's untreated hearing loss. If that wasn't the case, there'd be all kinds of people walking out there with dementia just because they have a hearing loss. But this is untreated hearing loss. And what happens is individuals, typically those that develop hearing loss over a period of time, later in life, they start to withdraw and they become isolated. They stop playing cards, they stop going to church, they stop talking on the phone, what have you. And the brain is a muscle just like every other muscle that we have. And when you stop using it, it starts to atrophy. So people tend to, I believe the studies say that it's usually between 6 and 7 years from the onset of a hearing loss for an individual later in life until the time they actually get a hearing aid or a cochlear implant, until the time they actually address that hearing loss and get amplification. During that time is a critical period because of the isolation and the withdrawal. Um, a lot of people deal with depression. It can be very emotionally draining. So, if you know individuals that you suspect has a hearing loss that are in denial, which is very common, you might want to throw this out to them because it happens. And we don't like to scare people, but sometimes it's necessary to get them to take the steps that they need to take to get the amplification that they need to get them back into um, socializing with their family and their friends and going back to church and all of that stuff. So I hate doing this online because I'm looking at a screen and I'm looking at myself and there's no engagement here. It's so hard. So please feel free. Somebody raise their hand and ask a question. Make me feel like I'm talking with you instead of at you. Um, I just want to point out that there are currently a little over 700,000 Kentuckians that have a hearing loss. We're everywhere. We're not going away, and we're probably going to grow. So you have to get used to us. A little bit about being politically correct. I've heard all of it. I crack up when people ask me if I'm deaf, which is very common where I'm from. I'm from a little town in LaRue County. So I've been asked many times if I'm deaf or hard of hearing, and I crack up. No, I'm not deaf either. Deaf and dumb, deaf and dumb, no longer acceptable. And those were used way back in the day. Mute also, mute is actually a speech impediment. It has nothing to do with ability to hear. And most people that have a hearing loss are able to speak to some degree. Whether it's intelligible or not varies, but there are very few people that are mute just because they have a hearing loss. Hearing impaired is also not acceptable these days. There are many people in the deaf and hard of hearing community that see this as negative because they don't feel impaired. They well-rounded members, productive members of society. They don't feel impaired because they can't hear. They just don't like that term. So the commission encourages people to use the term deaf and hard of hearing. This is what we encourage the media, everybody else to use. It's kind of the umbrella for everybody. And throughout the presentation, you'll see the acronym DHH, and that's what it stands for. Let me catch up with myself here. And saying that this is politically correct, it changes with the times. I mean, originally, I believe the commission was the Kentucky Commission for, it might have been the hearing impaired or the deaf and hearing impaired, I'm not sure. And then that was changed later. It hasn't changed in the last 20 some years. I doubt that it will, just because this seemed to be kind of a good umbrella for them to fit under. I personally don't get offended by the term hearing impaired, and I know many that don't. I know many individuals that actually use that to describe themselves because they kind of see that as the umbrella. It is really a personal thing when it comes to self identity. But I do know some individuals that actually get angry when they hear hearing impaired. So just a word of caution, just be careful. The deaf and hard of hearing community is so diverse, and people tend to see this as an all or nothing. You're either deaf or you're hearing, and it's not the case. And this graph that I've made is not based on reality. It's just out of my head. But this is basically I believe 10% of the population now depends entirely on American Sign Language. So they function only through sign. There's another small percentage that uses only listening and spoken language. The rest of us are somewhere in between all of that. We'll use some signs, we use gestures, we use lip reading, whatever it takes to get the message across. And that's the majority of us. It's a matter of just putting all of the pieces together to try to come up with the right message. Sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't. And sometimes it can be embarrassing because we don't know that we didn't understand until later. And words of warning about lip reading. Most people lip read to a degree, and that includes hearing people. And if you don't think that you lip read, try having a conversation with somebody that covers up their mouth and see how much you can understand. Um, it's important, and facial expressions are important. But through the years, they've done tons of research and found that at best, lip reading is only 30 to 35% accurate. And that leaves a really big margin of error. There are so many words in the English language that look similar on the mouth that it's too easy to misunderstand. And like I said, sometimes we think we get the message and we don't find out till later that we misunderstood. It can be embarrassing when it comes to healthcare or certain situations. It can even be dangerous. I don't imagine that you would have a dangerous situation in the library, but you never know. Um, but I caution people about trusting lip reading simply because we think we get it and sometimes we find out we didn't. It certainly helps, but I caution you about relying on that 100%. And the same goes with written notes. Written notes can be a great tool, probably something that you could use very effectively in the library for individuals who are looking for certain materials because you're not having an in-depth, long, drawn-out conversation. You're just talking about where you need to go and find something. But written notes should be used for simple messages where there's not a whole lot of ability to misunderstand something. It needs to be brief, and they're really not effective for individuals whose first language is ASL. And I'm going to talk about ASL for just a second because many people think ASL is just English on the hand, and that's not the case. First of all, it's one of the most widely used languages in the United States. I've seen it's the third most common and fourth most common. I think it goes kind of back and forth. It's taught in a lot of public schools. It's taught in a lot of universities as a foreign language. I wish it was taught from first grade on. Sadly, it's not. It's used mostly by deaf and hard of hearing Americans and Canadians. It is not universal. Most countries have their own. There is a universal language. Not many people are very fluent in it. I forgot what it's called even, but it's mostly based on gestures. So you can't just, if you know ASL, you can't assume that you're going to go to Japan and be able to communicate with the deaf there. However, I will say that many deaf individuals who are fluent in ASL, when they travel internationally, they often have an easier time communicating than people that don't use sign language, simply because of the similarities of some of the signs and gestures. And if, I think too, because we've had to guess and try to put things together. So we kind of have a leg up on the guessing game there. But ASL is a distinct language. It has its own grammar and syntax, which are very similar to French and Spanish. I don't speak another language and I'm not a linguist, so I can't get into the nitty gritty on that, but I will give you a couple of examples. And there's also no written form. While ASL uses English vocabulary, because the grammar and syntax is different, it can lead to some confusion. And one of the sentence that I have here on the slide says, if I sign this in ASL, if somebody loosely translated that into English, it would be my father's mind's gone. But what I'm really saying is my father's mind's out there. He's brilliant. So totally different meanings. Another example is when I was younger and found out just how bad my hearing loss was and was going to be. It was progressive, so it became worse over time. I started visiting the School for the Deaf. And at one point, I was in a class that was discussing eating different kinds of animals. They were talking about eating venison and snake and just different things. And the boy beside of me passed me a note and opened it up, and it said, "You eat like turtle." And I was offended because I thought he was insulting me somehow. And the girl on the other side of me realized that I was confused. And she said, he means, do you like to eat turtle? And I was like, oh, okay. So just because those words were switched in a sentence, it meant something totally different to me because English was my first language. So when somebody asks for an ASL interpreter, that's why. Now, there's many people like myself whose first language is English, and we use the conceptually accurate ASL signs, but we sign them grammatically according to English grammar. So it's called conceptually accurate signed English, not to confuse you. But typically, an individual will not request an interpreter unless they absolutely need one. They know that they're expensive, um, and it's just not something that we like to do unless it's necessary. But just to emphasize, ASL is not English on the hands. It's not that simple. There are other forms of sign language. There's signed exact English, which is English on the hands, but very few people use this outside of a classroom. There's not a large population of it's called CC interpreters. There's cued speech, which I've never actually seen used here in Kentucky. Both signed exact English and cued speech have pockets in the United States where it's very popular. Kentucky doesn't happen to be one of them, sadly. So more often than not, when you're asked for an interpreter, that's what they're going to be asking for is ASL. Just to check in with you guys, does anybody have a question? Yeah. I don't see any raised hands and nothing in the chat. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the unfun stuff. Just to make you aware, I'm sure you're probably going to hear this more than once throughout this conference, but the ADA does require that Title II entities, which are state and local governments, and Title III entities, businesses and nonprofits serve the public, communicate effectively with individuals who have communication difficulties. And this is just to make sure that the communication with these people is just as effective as it is with people who don't have communication disabilities. And I've added a link there where you can find this in writing. What that means when it comes to individuals that have a hearing loss is that they may ask for interpreters. They might ask for assistive listening devices, which would be, there are things called looping systems where you can loop rooms or entire buildings where people can use a telecoil switch on their hearing aid, where anything that is spoken will go directly to their hearing aid. I'm assuming that cochlear implants have that, but I don't know for sure. There are all kinds of assistive listening devices, and we have information that we can share with that. I don't believe I put a link in here, but you guys can email me. I'm happy to share information related to that. Some of these are cheap, some are not. Some assistive listening devices are considered personal devices, which it would not be the responsibility of the library or any business or organization to provide that. It's up to the individual. Then some are considered an accommodation. Video relay services. I'm not sure how many of you guys are familiar with the old-fashioned TTYs, which were the telephones that we had to use. I don't think I even have one in here anymore because basically they're non-existent. It was just a small typewriter that deaf people used. You had to make the phone call and you put the phone down on the headset and you type back and forth. Then if you needed to call somebody that didn't have one of these, you had to go through a relay system, and you would call the relay system where an interpreter would answer the phone, and they would type to you and then speak to the person that you were calling. It sounds really complicated, but it's not. Today, about the only people that use these are individuals that live in areas where they do not have access to high-speed internet, or individuals typically elderly who aren't skilled with technology or scared of technology. But most profoundly deaf, hard of hearing senior citizens are better with technology than I am, just because it's leveled the playing field for us, so they were on top of it. But the video relay services is a whole lot like FaceTime, where you have a computer screen, you call it's VRS, you call VRS, and you have an operator, they call it a communication assistant, who pops up on your screen. He's an interpreter, and they have a headset, and they call whoever you're trying to reach and speak to them, and they sign to you. So we actually see each other and we can communicate in sign language. And then, of course, two deaf people can call each other directly and communicate in sign language, which is so much better than trying to type everything you're trying to say. And even more so for individuals whose first language is ASL, because they would have to try to type in English because ASL has no written form. So there was a lot of confusion. So the VRS technology has really, really leveled the playing field for us. Any individual with a hearing loss in the state of Kentucky that doesn't have a wireless device probably lives in a cave, because I can't tell you how much these have changed my life. I travel a lot for work. I'm terrified of tornadoes, and that was probably the one time I truly felt disabled, is when I'm in a car and the weather's bad and I can't understand the radio. Now, all I have to do is pull over and pull up the radar. I can see where the red dot is. I know whether I need to get in a ditch or drive faster or slow down. So I'm thankful. It never leaves my side. KCDHH has a program. We distribute these at no cost to the consumer. This is paid for everybody in the state that has a telephone, whether it's wireless or landline. I believe they pay 2 cents a month. You can look on your phone bill and see it. It goes to TRS. We get 1 penny, and that goes through PSC, and we're able to fund this equipment. We have a simple application. We don't ask any questions about income because it's not based on income. phones are no longer a luxury, they're a necessity. This became really obvious during Hurricane Katrina. And so a lot has changed really as far as wireless technology in recognizing that it's actually a need for in many situations for individuals that have disabilities. So anybody that you know that has a hearing loss that struggles with a telephone, that can contact us. We'll send them an application. The most difficult part of the application is that they have to have it signed by their doctor saying that they do have a hearing loss and would benefit from the equipment. We don't even ask to see an audiogram. So all of this can be found on our website. I have that on our last slide. So let's see, interpreters obviously, and then captioners. We have, oh, let me back up a minute to interpreters. Interpreting can now be done in person, on site, or remotely through computers. We often have meetings, we use remote interpreters. We'll pull up an interpreter that's in another state. The VRS, the video relay service, most of the interpreters we use are in another state that pop up. Gotta love technology. I actually have a love-hate relationship with it, but it's certainly made life easier for me and individuals like me. But the same is true for captioners. And captioning, it's often called CART. It's computer assisted real-time captioning. And these are people that are trained as court stenographers that can actually type verbatim what's happening in the room and what's going on. This is something that we often provide for our hard of hearing constituents that don't sign and can't use the services of an interpreter. And again, it can be used in person or remotely. And more often than not now, I believe captions are done remotely because there's so few captioners that are available. And real quickly, the ADA applies to all the services that are open to the public. So whether it is a workshop that you bring in or storytelling, what have you, all of these services have to be made accessible to all individuals with a disability. So this would also include individuals that are deaf and hard of hearing. What we do say is that they can't pop up at 6 o'clock and say, okay, I'm ready for this workshop. Where's my interpreter? They have to let you know in advance. We encourage people, if you post things on social media, if you have flyers that go out to the community, always add something on there that says, if you need an accommodation, please let us know 2 weeks in advance. That way you have enough time to locate somebody. Interpreters are expensive. They're not cheap. There is an undue burden clause in the ADA that says, obviously, if providing an accommodation will cause an undue burden to the library, that is something that you can be exempt from, but you're still required to try to provide accessibility. We encourage people often to contact some of there's two interpreter training programs in the state. Eastern Kentucky University has one, and the University of Louisville has one. And these are interpreters that are in training. Sometimes they will do this as a part of their practicum to give them experience. This would be, with a word of caution, more appropriate if you have a program for children, something that's very basic. It would probably not be something if you have a profoundly deaf individual who depends on ASL and you're providing a workshop. That might be kind of complicated. They may need a licensed interpreter, but I'll get more to specifics on interpreters. But there are ways to do it cheaper. We're happy to help with that. We're happy to help connect you to interpreters. We have interpreter directories that we can share that list contact information for interpreter referral agencies and other interpreters across the state. And all you got to do is contact us and we'll get that sent out to you. Just a word about interpreters. Again, it's more than, because ASL is more than English on the hands. It's complex, it's specialized, and it is not easy. I've been signing for 40 years. I would not want to be an interpreter, even if I could hear, because you're having to take in one language and put out another almost simultaneously. It's very complicated. And the licensed interpreters that we have here in the state have trained for years. Knowing some sign language is not the same as being an interpreter. If you have staff that know some sign language, it's okay to use them for simple communication, like where's this, where's that. Very simple, basic questions, but to use them to try to interpret a workshop or a presentation, no, not effective. And it's not fair to them either. And Kentucky has a licensure law that requires all interpreters to work and get money. They have to have a license to do this. And this is to protect the individuals who actually hire them, because most individuals don't have the skills needed to assess whether an interpreter is effective or not. So they have to have a national certification, then they have to apply for licensure, and they have to maintain this licensure. So this is something to ensure that they're capable of doing the job that you're paying them to do. It's actually against the law to pay an interpreter who's not licensed. So keep that in mind. And again, we can provide the resources on where to find them, how to schedule them, how to work with them. We have all kinds of information to share. We're happy to share with people. Any questions yet? Yep. Okay. I promise I'm going to get to library specifics in a minute. Myths about people with hearing loss. The first one is so confusing. Individuals who speak clearly can hear. That's not the case. I speak fairly clear, not to people from the northern part of the country, but I'm profoundly deaf. I can't hear. I use interpreters. And there's also a misunderstanding about hearing. When it comes to hearing loss, it's not all or nothing. There are two types of hearing loss. I'm just going to throw this out there real quick. They're nerve deafness and conductive hearing loss. With nerve deafness, it affects the nerves inside the cochlea in the inner ear. And those nerves are what send the sounds, the vibrations. It sends the message to the brain. When those nerves don't work correctly, then the message is garbled. It's all just messed up. And lots of people I can hear the radio in the car if it's loud enough. But I'm probably singing something different than other people are because I don't understand it clearly. I'm constantly telling my kids to turn the TV down because it's loud, but I can't understand it if I don't have the captions on. So that's nerve deafness. It has, while I don't hear all the sounds you hear, I can hear some with my hearing aids, but it's still, the message is still garbled. Conductive hearing loss is what you typically see often in senior citizens. It happens in the middle ear. It's where the three bones are in there. They calcify, and those three bones work together to push sound vibrations into the inner ear. When those bones calcify and don't push that sound through, often the intensity of the sound or the volume of the sound can force it in there. So volume can help with that. And often conductive hearing loss can be fixed, whereas nerve deafness can't. So just because somebody can hear some things and not other things, we're often accused of, well, you hear what you want to hear because you heard me when I said this, but you didn't hear me when I said that. Or often I hear my name at the doctor's office when they call my name. But I've trained myself to hear not specifically Anita, but the three syllables, da da da. That's what I'm listening for. And of course, I'm watching. As soon as that person sticks their head out that door, I'm watching. So I've got two things working with me that other people don't. I've trained myself for that. So it can be very confusing sometimes to people when somebody understands some things and not another. And that's just a little bit of why. Again, it's a myth that all people with hearing loss can read lips. It's not true. Some can't read them at all. Some have a better grasp, but again, only 30 to 35% accurate. I've got a question up here, and I'm gonna address that in just a second. Hearing aids are not like glasses. They don't correct our hearing 20/20 like glasses do with your vision. Even cochlear implants don't do that. They help. It's a tool. That's the best I can say. It makes a huge difference for some. I know some people who've had cochlear implants that actually refer to their life as before and after they had their implant. I know people that have hearing aids that do the same before I got my hearing aids and after I got my hearing aids. But neither one of those are able to fix the hearing loss completely. Shouting does not help. Again, sometimes it helps those with conductive hearing loss speaking louder, not shouting. But when you shout, it contorts your face. It makes it look like you're angry, and it makes it even harder to put all those different messages together to understand what's being said. And just a little humor here, but deaf and hard of hearing individuals are poor souls that need to be pitied. That's not true. I tell people all the time, I need to be pitied, but it's because I'm a single mother of two girls. It has nothing to do with my hearing loss. So, someone asked about tips for working with interpreters. And yes, I'm going to go back to that slide real quick. If there's a situation where you bring an interpreter in and you're using an interpreter to talk to a deaf person, always talk to the deaf person and look at them. Talk to them just like you're talking to them and forget the interpreter's there. We tend to want to say, tell her I said, tell her, blah, 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 blah. Ask her, talk directly to the deaf person. Have eye contact with them. The interpreter knows what they need to do for that situation. They will typically stand beside of you. The deaf individual will go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Sometimes they'll watch you. I do this. If I'm able to get the message from the source, I want to get the message from the source. But then there's times I need to look to the interpreter, reinforce that. And then there's others who don't have residual hearing like I do that will have to watch the interpreter almost entirely. But they're not the person you're speaking to, the deaf person is. So make sure you maintain that eye contact and talk directly to them. Also, if you have an event at the library and you're using an interpreter, they will know where they need to be. Typically, they will stand in the front by the speaker. If it's a speaker that moves around a lot, they may stand to one side and just stay there. If it's a speaker that moves around a lot and demonstrates things, I had a statistics class in college, and my interpreter was side by side with the teacher because he was all over the place and at the board and doing this and that and the other. And there was no way that I could watch her and see what he was doing at the same time. So she kind of shadowed him, and I could watch them both at the same time, and it was perfect. So trust in the interpreters, and if you have questions, ask. If you have something that is more than 2 hours long, the best practice is to have two interpreters because they need to switch off because it's very tiring, not just physically, but mentally, having to shift languages and the quality of their interpreting can be affected the longer that they're on. So having two, they're able to rotate. So I'm trying to think if there's other big things. Oh, another thing is, I'm dealing with this right now for a board meeting I have Saturday. If you have a presentation, a speaker, if you have an agenda for a meeting, if the speaker has a PowerPoint, any materials that you can get prior to this that you can send to the interpreters is helpful. That way they can familiarize themselves with the content and maybe some of the specialized vocabulary that they might need for that event. So it's helpful. And they'll typically ask for that. Okay, I hope I covered that. Okay, let's see. Myths and communication tips. Obviously, it takes a lot of patience. It's going to take more time to communicate with a deaf or hard of hearing individual than it will your average person. And common sense, that's kind of, I hesitated to use that because I don't want anybody to think we're saying that they don't have common sense. But sometimes people get anxious about interpreting with somebody that has communication differences. So common sense goes out the window when we get anxious. Just relax. I tell people, become Italian. Don't be afraid to use your hand. Don't be afraid to use your facial expression. Don't be afraid to point. Pointing is totally acceptable within the deaf and hard of hearing community. So just relax and try not to think about trying to do everything right, because it's perfectly okay to ask questions. The responsibility of effective communication lies with both parties. So it's not totally on you. It's partly the individual you're speaking to. They have to let you know what works for them. If they don't, ask, what can I do to make this easier for you? And be creative. I tell people all the time, there's a little Mexican place up the street where a lot of staff from here like to go for lunch. And most of them have strong accents. Several of them don't even speak, they only speak a little English. And the first couple of times I was there, the guy would ask if I wanted chicken or beef, and I just could not understand him. So he finally said chicken or beef. It worked. I knew what he was talking about. So there's nothing wrong with being creative. Have fun. And be willing to step outside of your comfort zone. I know all of us, especially when we're at work, we're expected to be on, and we want to do everything right. And so that kind of keeps us sometimes down. Get out of your comfort zone. It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay not to do it right the first time, because you don't know what you don't know, and you won't know if you don't ask. So by all means do. And if someone gets upset with you because you ask a question, that's on them and not you. A few more specific communication tips is it's very important to get the person's attention before you start talking to them. If they're on their phone, wait till they're done, or touch them, tap them on the shoulder, or if they're touching a piece of furniture, you can tap the furniture. They'll feel the vibrations. If they're talking to somebody else or whatever, just make sure they're looking at you, because if they're not, they may have no idea. Depending on the situation, if the background's quiet and the acoustics in the room and all the different variables and the stars are all lined up, sometimes if you speak to me, I might know it. I might hear you and look at you. But that's if all the stars are lined up. Many people won't. So that's a real important thing to keep in mind. Speak slowly, and I caution that you don't have to speak like this. But if you're from New York, if you're from the North where they typically speak really quick, slow down. You just need to speak normally. Do not over enunciate your words. It makes it harder for us to lip read. And you'd be surprised how many people do that. I got in trouble my first day of high school because the superintendent came to talk to me. And he said, Anita, you will ride bus 59. And I said, okay. I thought I was being cute, and he didn't appreciate it. um, also, look directly at the person. I struggle because people don't look at each other anymore. I love technology, but that's part of the nature of this beast. They're constantly on the computer looking something up or looking down, writing something. As society, we just don't look at people anymore. That needs to change. My landlord's Hungarian, and he has a really strong Hungarian accent. And I told him one day, I said, Steve, I'm surprised I can understand you so well. And he said, it's because my mama taught me manners. She told me to look at people when I talk to them and speak to them clearly. And it hadn't dawned on me until he said that. How many times I encounter people just in public stores everywhere. They don't look at me when they speak to me. So it's a habit that we've gotten into that we need to get out of. It's just manners. We need to look at people when we speak to them. Um, Obviously, don't put something in your mouth. I can't imagine that you would. But my daddy was a smoker, and he would talk to me and have that cigarette in his mouth, and I was like, Daddy, I can't understand you. Take a cigarette out of your mouth, or chewing gum. Um, and if at first you don't succeed, try again. And sometimes people will repeat the same thing over and over and over. It doesn't work because something in that sentence is not clicking. So sometimes if you rephrase it with different words, it's like, aha, like if you say something is a quarter and you say this 4 or 5 times and somebody doesn't get it, try saying 50 cents. Sometimes, just using a different word will make all the difference in the world. Use facial expressions and body language, and by all means, gesture. I train a lot of state police cadets, and they are trained to be such a blank slate. And it's so hard for us because I'm like, when you pull me over, you have to give me something because I don't know if I'm just in a little bit of trouble or if I'm going to the pen for the rest of my life because you've given me nothing. So we need facial expressions. We need to know that's just one piece, and it's critical. Simple notes, again, that can be used. You can use a piece of paper and pad. You can use a dry erase board. You can use a phone to type back and forth, an iPad. But the biggest thing is patience and taking time. I've even had people, if there's a situation where you've got a big, long line, you might say, can you wait just a second? Because I want to take the time, make sure we're doing this right, and take care of this next person or whatever. Just don't make somebody wait too long. Um, but just don't try to do it real fast because somebody else is there. And different things that you can actually do in your library to make it more deaf and hard of hearing friendly, other than making sure the communication is effective, is look for materials that are related to hearing loss. Sign language, deaf culture, materials written by deaf authors. They're everything. Anything you can imagine, there's something out there equivalent, either written by deaf people or written for deaf people. Provide presentations related to hearing loss for the community. I just did one in LaRue County. My sister works at the library there, and I was able to go in and talk about hearing loss in general, and was able to help several individuals that were there that were trying to get hearing aids. They weren't sure where to go. One had a family member that they thought had a hearing loss and wasn't sure how to address it. These are things that KCDHH can do. We have board members scattered all over the state. They can do them. There's other members of the deaf community that would be happy to come in and do this as a service. You could provide ASL classes. These should always be provided by somebody that has a hearing loss. I've caught different places providing ASL classes by people who learned a little bit of sign language on TikTok and YouTube. You don't want to do that. There's plenty of individuals across the state that live this life that are capable of teaching a basic communication class, a basic ASL communication class. And that's something we can help you with. ASL storytelling. This would be great for kids that have a hearing loss. So many of our children are isolated. You know, 30 years ago, when a family had a child that had a hearing loss, the only option they had was to send them to the school for the deaf in Danville. And now about 85% of our kids are educated in public school. But what this means is that they may be the only one in the school that has a hearing loss. They may never see other kids. There may be other kids in their county, but they may never see them because they may attend a different school. So ASL storytelling is important. You could have members of the deaf community come in and read books. You could reach out to the deaf and hard of hearing community. You could reach out to the schools that have deaf and hard of hearing children and provide this as a service. There's April is Deaf History Month. May is Better Hearing and Speech Month. These are things that you could display in the library and share on social media and with the community. We have information about this. This is stuff that you can also Google and find all kinds of information online. We've also worked with several libraries across the state to set up video relay service, to set up video phones in their library for people in the community that might not have the internet that's required at home. They're able to go to the library and use the VRS system to make phone calls. Sorensen is the company that does that. You can Google them or you can contact us and we can give you the information. I'm not sure who they have that is over that program now, but I can find out if that's something you think your library is interested in doing. And they do this for free. And it's really important to let the deaf and hard of hearing community know that you value them and that you strive to be accessible and strive to be or make them a part of your library. I'm happy to work with all of you guys through email, through Zoom meetings, individually in different ways, different things that you can do to provide you with resources. I'm happy to come do presentations. I'm happy to do staff training. These are things that we do as part of our mandate. It's all free. All you need to do is let us know. Here's some links to places where you can find deaf and hard of hearing specific library materials. I would encourage every one of you to take advantage of this bottom, well, I've lost my words here. The bottom listing is signing time. And this is, I'm happy to say now, a friend of mine. Her name is Rachel Coleman. And she had a deaf child and was frustrated because there was nothing on TV for her that was accessible. And so she created a TV show. And I call her the Deaf Barney. And I make fun of her because she's so cheesy when she does this. But she sings, she signs, she talks, she has guests. She has a DVD series. You can buy one or you can buy them all. Families love these things. Parents look to her. Her and I attend a lot of similar professional conferences, and I get tickled because the moms are all lined up to talk to her. And I'm like, you're like Jason Momoa to the mamas. Everybody wants a minute with you. But she did something something that nobody's ever done, and I admire her for that. And she's made such a difference in the lives of these families that have deaf and hard of hearing children. And people don't realize, but 95% of babies born with a hearing loss are born to hearing families that have never met a deaf person, so they don't know anything about it. And when they do want to learn signs, they need to start with the basics, and that's it. These are signs that babies will use. She has so many different programs now. It all started with Signing Time. Now she has some that are geared toward babies and some that are geared toward older children. So I encourage all of you to visit that website and see the materials she has. And if you, by some stroke of luck, you get a great big grant thrown your way, you find yourself in a lot of money, I would buy everything that she has and make families aware of it. Even families with hearing babies. They show that babies that learn sign language, the terrible twos are not nearly as bad because the terrible twos are caused by language breakdowns, frustration with not being able to communicate. And babies are able to communicate as early as 8, 9 months old in sign, where it's typically much later where they're able to speak their needs. So even hearing families will take advantage of this. And I even refer adults who don't have hearing children, if they're wanting to learn sign, I say start with the kid stuff first. So you're going to have a lot of people that will use this material if they know that you have it. And I'm running out of time, so I need to speed up. This is just a slide about the relay phones, and that's what the setup looks like. And then what the Q&A. So I hope, even though you haven't asked me any questions throughout, you might have some now. And again, if we run out of time, if you need to leave, you can email me at any point. I didn't add my information to the slide, but it's anita.dowd@ky.gov. And I'm going to see if I can add this to the chat. Oh, it's my add button. I moved it. Please feel free to email me at any time. If I do not respond to you right away, it means I'm not at my desk because I'm a slave to that envelope that pops up down there. And I'm happy to help you guys in any way that I can because I'm a lover of knowledge, and we're better to get knowledge than the library. So I'm a lover of libraries, and anything that I can do to help make them accessible to my community, I'm happy to do. Just let me know.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Anita. If y'all want to stick around in this room, we've got courses and resources from the Human Development Institute next. Like Anita said, you can reach out to her. If you think of something later, reach out to us and we'll get you in touch with her. Stick around for more fun.